Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Stratosphere Lounge after a 2 week delay. I'm your host, Bill Whittle, and looks like we're rolling on all of these guys, and it's good to be back. A few things to talk about while I enjoy my 100-calorie Snicker bar. I've been working and I'm very hungry. I haven't had a chance to look at the questions yet, but it's good to be back. Sorry about all the chewy. Hi, everybody. I was gone for 2 weeks. Last week was really fun. I went to the Star Citizen Convention in Austin, Texas. And we got a chance to meet some of the wacky people that have been involved with this project from the beginning. People who put in so much time and effort and just dedicated so much of their lives to this endeavor. They just put their heart and soul into it. And after all of that work, to meet them in person finally, I just can't tell you how disappointing it was. It was just almost unbearable. Volume's very low. Oh, see, it seems reasonably okay to moi. Let me boost it a little bit. Everybody's saying low volume. I don't know what the problem might be here. Let me have a look. I'm showing good outputs. Let's see if the situation is going to be improved here. Input USB Rode Podcaster. I don't know. I'm getting really good levels here. I don't know what to say about that. Hang on. I don't know. I'm getting really good levels here. And I'm getting good feedback from the mic. It just got louder? Well, anyway, as I said, meeting all these people who put all this work and time into the whole Star Citizen thing, getting to meet them finally was just one of the most crushing events of my life, one of the most biggest disappointments. And I'm still trying to get over it. I just went down for 4 days after I got back. I just burrowed and crawled under my pillows and in a corner and wrapped a blanket around myself and just cried for 3 days. As I am wont to do. Anyway, seriously, we had a really great time. And we saw some amazing things. Nothing that blew our mind like previous years, but they would show you something at CitizenCon in October, something mind-blowing, and you wouldn't see it in the world until a year later. This time, they took a much bigger risk and showed us the stuff that's in development now that we will see in weeks. We really did have a wonderful time. It was a really great little mini vacation for me. It was fun to get away from the work and just kind of do that. And our friend Vipercheck here, otherwise known as Foghorn, submitted a bunch of obscene gestures that were chosen for motion capture. And so Foggy got a chance to direct actual actors in those black leotards with the white tracking bubbles on them. It was actually pretty high honor for him, to have me there. So I'm sure it was a big day for him. But seriously, it was great. Known miscreant Matt Lloyd had gotten us all a bunch of shirts, and they looked just cool enough to be cool, but if they'd had another 10% on them, they would have looked like a gay bowling league. But they weren't. They were just right there on the border. So those shirts were cool. And also, known miscreant Matt Lloyd also did something really great for a change. He got us. I had a bunch of them, and I guess I just left them at home. which is a shame. You see something. No. Yeah. Yeah. Well, as you probably know by now, my full name is William O. Whittle, and the O stands for organization. Organization's my middle name. I don't have mommy, but Matt got a chance to make us some business cards. They were really cool looking. They're about this big, and they were made out of plastic, and they had all the information on it. And then if you held it up to the back of an Android or iPhone with the software enabled, it would just take you to the website. You hold it up to your phone, and the phone would go right to aurorarepublic.space. That was really cool too. The improvement in the facial graphics and everything was so good that I actually thought, oh God, have I wasted all this time on this stuff just because now the motion capture stuff looks really great, but I have not. I'm just as I got on the show, the Stratosphere Lounge to get going, I was late. I actually started the show on time only because I hit the wrong button. I hit Petunia when I wanted to hit the pingos, Los Pingos. But right up until about 3 minutes before showtime, I'm cutting this 16-minute video I did on the entire idea of the Aurora project, how it works, what it's all about. And I'm cutting in a bunch of really great video, and it's really starting to cook and starting to make a lot of sense. So I'll probably release that link to Stratoloungers and so on. And if any of you need to shed excess cash, which is an enormous problem these days with Donald Trump as president, but if it turns out that you're carrying just too much money on you to be comfortable and it's tough getting upstairs, that kind of thing, maybe you want to make a tax-deductible donation. Eric Blake tells me that Henry Cavill has been cast in a role in Star Citizen. That's great. I don't know anything about his politics. That's something I like about an actor, when I don't know anything about their politics. But he sure is a great Superman. He looks the part more than Chris Reeves did. He didn't have the same scripts to work with, but he's terrific. And kind of sucks that you have to cast a Brit to play Superman, but we're running out of men in this country, as if nobody's noticed. But I like him. He's a good actor, and he was in Man from U.N.C.L.E. with Armie Hammer, and I know Armie Hammer relatively well. He's a great guy. Really great guy. So we did that, and we had a blast, got a chance to talk to everybody, made an impression on folks. I've been working for the previous year and almost nonstop for the previous 4 months on trying to get this first video ready for October 10th. I mean, for the last 4 months, I'm not trying to whip myself or brag or anything. I'd be working 20-hour days to get this stuff done, and we're making progress, and everything's at 85%. And finally, I realized I'm not going to have the first episode. Maybe I'll get a trailer, and then I realized that's not going to happen either. And that would depress me for 3 days. But by the time it came time to actually go, I was over that, and there was no pressure, and didn't bring anything out there. Showed a couple of little clips to a few individuals, and we're just going to come out. Roaring when we're ready. And that is an enormous relief. I wish I'd had that since 4 or 5 months ago, in any event. It was great. And once again, the overriding emotion for me, well, I had two emotions, really. One of them is that classic line on I Love Lucy with Hans Conried. He comes in, he's going to elevate their speech. They want to learn how to speak a little more sophisticated fashion. So Hans Conried has Lucy and Ethel and Fred and Ricky in the living room, and he says, "Now, before I begin, there are two words that I absolutely insist that you never, ever use, ever. One of them is swell, and the other is lousy. And I don't know if it was Fred said, well, why don't you tell us the swell one first? So I had two opinions about the whole Star Citizen thing. One of them was swell, and the other one was lousy. I'll tell you the lousy one first. This is not a bad thing. It's just an interesting thing. That cohort, there's 2,500 people, something like that. And of the 2,500 people, 2,470 of them were virtually the same person. They were white males, young but not crazy, older than you would have thought, I suppose. And very smart, and also, as a general rule, kind of out of shape. There were 2,500 people there, but there was enough mass to make 4,000, I would say, without any problem at all. And that just bothered me a little bit for reasons I will elaborate on in a minute. The swell observation is that watching what they were doing and the complexity of what they were doing and the ingenuity of the workarounds that they were coming up, not just workarounds, just inventing new technologies, just took my breath away. There were little things about just shaping a person's head, and they said, okay, so we can change the shape of a person's head. Now let's put a hat on the person, and the hat gets a little kind of weird. And they said, now let's put a helmet on him, and then the helmet, the supposed to be solid helmet, is moving and changing. And they said, no, we had to do this, we have to do this, and it was just unbelievable. Finally, we saw my favorite part of the demonstration was called character DNA, and they basically are able to make a facial rig now where they can adjust any number of 100 parameters, and they had a pre-recorded speech that they'd motion captured a couple years ago. And they mapped it onto one person, and then they mapped it onto another person, and they were perfect. And then you saw a screen with like 6 people, and they're all doing the same speech. One's like a young Asian guy. There's an older Indian guy. There's a black guy. There's everything, and they're all doing the speech synchronized, and they're all their motions and all their facial capture stuff is perfect. And then they did the thing that really blew my mind. They basically ran the whole speech start to finish, 2 minutes maybe, and constantly were just slowly tweaking all of the facial values. So in the middle of a speech, you'd watch somebody go from being like Southeast Asian to maybe like Korean, and then they just like kind of become a little more Japanese, and they become kind of Pacific Islanders, and just in a state of constant flow. It was fantastic. But the problems they have to overcome in order to do this led me to my swell observation, which is, while there was certainly enough mass in there to build 4,000 people, there was enough brain power in there to build the Democratic Party, to be honest with you. I mean, there's more wattage in that room than I think in the Democratic Party. And that is a bittersweet thing to reflect upon, because the amount of brain power both in the audience and on the stage and in the organization was so overwhelming, and just such not just brilliant, but artistically brilliant and dynamic and out of the box thinking and unbelievably complex problems are being solved by all these different aspects of the team. And I thought, man, you got a Mars team here. You got an unparalleled Mars team here. These people are so smart they could do anything, and here they are making a game. And that was the bittersweet part of it. It's like, can we apply people to something a little more serious? And then I realized, no, we can't. Everybody wants to go into space. That entire cohort of 2,470 of us out of the 2,500 that were there, we all wanted the same things. We all grew up on Star Trek for the older ones, Star Wars for the younger ones. Want to drive on alien planets. We want to fly in spaceships and land on places. And we don't want to be taken on tour. We want to be able to just pick up, go out there, find a hill that we think looks cool, land on the hill, walk around. And that's exactly what this game allows us to do. and have sunk a significant amount of money into this game, company money, because I think it's the future of this. And when you see this kind of the pitch video, I think for those of you who are still doubters, it should get a little clearer. But in any event, this game has been delayed many times, and there's constantly problems with logging on and synchronizing, and the server drops you and stuff, and we don't really care. It's a little frustrating occasionally, but generally speaking, we don't care because we pay for this game. We're part of the 200 million that went into it, has gone into it, and continues to go into it, and when we see these things that they're doing, it's flabbergasting. It's just absolutely flabbergasting. Swaggering, malcontent Foghorn bought himself a gunship, and 4 or 5 of us, many of whom are here with us today in the live stream, we all just walked out. I mean, we're scattered all over the country, and we're in there, and we're looking, and we all walk out to this ship, and we get in it, and we go flying out looking for trouble. And I'm in one turret, and somebody's else in another turret, and somebody's flying. And it was the Valkyrie, and then it was the Hammerhead Foghorn. And I'm looking out of a turret. I've got these 4 gigantic, lasers, and I kind of spin around to the left, and I see Merlin over there in another turret, and I come around. And you're happy, you're there, and it's a really amazing thing. Now, they did one more thing. I won't go too much longer on Star Citizen. But one of the things that they introduced in this latest version, which is already being tested by those of us that have spent large fortunes on this game, is something that I thought was extremely trivial and really didn't look to me like it was going to be much of things. In fact, when I saw that it was coming out this early, I said, "Do you guys really, really have to work on something this silly? Can't we work on something more important?" And what they were working on and what they've delivered on is something called FOIP, which is Face over IP. And the short form of that is this. You can get a standard webcam like the one I'm using now. You load the software which comes with Star Citizen. The webcam looks at my face, without any markers, obviously, automatically detects my eyes, my eyebrows, my mouth position, all of that stuff. Turn of the head, eye position. It's looking at all of that, 60 frames a second, and it's taking my real-time facial expressions, and it's shipping them up to the server, and it is then sending that information down to the character that I am occupying in this virtual world, and mapping my expressions onto this avatar in essentially real time. So what that means is we just had a taste of it in a demo of it, but it's there now. We can do it anytime we want to. So what it means now is now I can meet Foghorn and Matt Lloyd and all the rest of the guys that are here in a virtual room, and not only is it just like a face, hey, now it's like I'm talking, they can hear my voice, and they can see my facial expressions. It's mind-boggling. And every day we get closer to this kind of, Ready Player One kind of world, which is alarming and amazing, and whether we like it or not, that's the future. So since it's the future, we might as well be there. Anyway, it's a great time. Had myself a blast. And many people criticize this game, many people jealous of this game. A number of people are constantly hyperventilating about how it's a scam and it's designed to just constantly keep taking money without ever delivering anything. And I realized, and I talked to a bunch of our guys about it too. Great to meet a bunch of people. We had 7 of us, something like that. And basically the consensus was the same as what I put so much more eloquently than anybody else, obviously. And that is this. It's worth the money we've already put into. We put a lot of money into this game, but I have already had experiences in this game that have made 12 Aurora Republic members. Thanks, Foggy. Well, we just didn't get all the cats in one place at one time. It seems like there were 7 of us wandering around, another 3 or 4 of them. Anyway, it was a great number, but it's worth it. Already it's worth it for me. I really feel like I can just get out there, hop on a vehicle, land someplace, roll out the rover, and just go exploring and seeing things and sunsets and things I'd always wanted to see. It's pretty good. And the best part of it is it gets better every year. It just gets more and more believable, more and more realistic. Frame rates go up, all of it. You just go out there by yourself and just watch the sunset, or, if you don't have the luxury of going out by yourself, sometimes you have to go out with other guys and hang out with them too. There's a race coming up called the Daymar Rally, and it's something like 200 kilometers or more, somewhere around there. Somebody could tell me in a second how long it is exactly. And what they're doing is they're basically taking a bunch of teams, and we're one team. We've actually got 2 teams entered in the race. And we are all going to race across this virtual planet in virtual buggies. And it's going to take, I don't know, it's going to be 8 hours, maybe 10 more, something like that. 360 kilometers, Simon says. Which means, we're going to have to be rolling in shifts, and we're going to be at it for 2 days, just driving and try not to hit rocks and swerving in order to make sure that you run over the indigenous cactus-like horrible life forms. That's just absolutely amazing. It's just grand. And 290 kilometers, 4 checkpoints. And the planet's the same for everybody. And you're going to have hundreds of people from around the world participating in real time. And they're all going to be seeing the same things. And if somebody from Australia is running a buggy that passes us, then we'll get to see the buggy go past us. And that's when we'll get on the lasers and we'll just blow those Aussie bastards off the face of my planet, and we'll continue on, and it's amazing. So anyway, that's that. So that was a great deal of fun, and it's good to be back. And we're making good progress. I have had a chance to meet a guy who's actually knows what he's doing, and in the space of 10 minutes accomplished what has taken me 3 months of constant research to try and figure out. So things will be going a little bit faster. We got the paperwork done. We got this pitch video is going to be finished before I go home tonight, and then we're ready to rumble. Let's see if we can do something with this. The only other thing I want to talk about before we get to questions is having missed the last 2 weeks. I don't know how many Bill Whittle Nows we had done when we talked last, but we're on our 4th week of them now. And after I don't know, it's been 3-4 years of trying to find the formula. I can't write any more stuff about foundational values. I've done 400 of these things on and off, and I don't know how else to do this kind of stuff. But I do have a lot to say about the news, and Scott brings some interesting questions, and I had a chance to really think on my feet, which I really like doing. I'm very proud of them. I think they're great. But the best thing about it is that I think this is the actual honest to God formula, the magic bullet. Because I don't have to write them. That alone's a deal killer now. And if I were going to be shooting them on my own, they would have a habit of shifting into Bill time. But I realized that I think I said last time we talked about this, I realized that I've done 10 years of right angles and trifectas, and I haven't missed a shoot unless I was out of town. So we just recorded to 28, 29, and 30 today, so that's 4 weeks, and every day. And the difference in my attitude and my mental health, which was never good to begin with, is enormous, because I spent the last 4 months cranking on this thing. It's like, I got to get back to the political stuff, but I have to. Now I shoot twice a week. Scott has been a frickin' champion. He's just absolutely, unbelievably taken over the thing. He does the editing. He does the posting. He does a tremendous sales pitch at the end of every one of these things. Talking with Matt, we had some problems with logins and passwords and all kinds of things coming from the decaying past. We're trying to basically leave Ramshackle Island and move the whole thing onto something new, and that's a little problematic. But in any event, because I have to meet Scott, I have to be here. And And since Scott goes to work in the morning early in Texas time, I have to be in the chair at 8 here. And on Mondays, I have to be in the chair, lit, ready to go at 6. And that's very, 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 very good for me. Very, 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 very good for me. I can't tell you how much. I mean, I did a year with the NRA show, and I got to be up there every morning, and it was great. And then 7, 8 months without it, you just start sliding. You know, I'm a night person, and I just start getting up later and later and staying up later. And now I'm here twice a week at 8 and once a week at 6. And Scott does an amazing job. And Scott has, is this live? Yes, Johnny the Frost. Unless you're watching on YouTube, in which case it's not, it's dead. And Scott picks I really, honestly, I still have to do some processing to get the sound. I have to audio filter the sound. I could probably get Scott the software. But the honest thing is, aside from that, I just don't touch it. I walk on. I spend 3.5 hours on my makeup, obviously. I think that's just goes, you know, we'll just take that as read. But then I just walk onto the set over there. And away we go. So it's been absolutely great, and I'm very, very, very proud of them. And I don't have to do all of this, you know, stuff that actually lowers the views, like green screen and graphics and compositing and special effects. The world has changed, the message has changed, the shows have changed, and the website's going to change in the next day, I think. We'll give it a little beta test. Maybe we'll do a Star Citizen thing with the website, and we'll alpha test it for 6 years. And you can all pay exorbitant funds while we alpha test that thing. In any event, it's been great. And by the way, I am aware of the fact that I owe you a Stratosphere Lounge. I have to just take the whole thing and I have to chop out the idiotic thing where I held up the address, and I've got to block that out. That's why I haven't done it yet. And the original P snowflake, I'm going to guess that the P stands for precious, says, Bill, your microphone on Bill Whittle Now has a sort of funny sound when you speak, sort of a thump-like thing. It's absolutely true. It's just terrible. I'll walk away from the mic and I'll put the headphones on. I'll hear this boom, 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 boom. It's just it's a USB mic, and I'm doing it through a computer. But once again, Scott Ott steps up and has shown me a rig he's got that uses actual audio components with XLR connections, and all goes into this thing, and then that one thing comes in through USB. But the mic's going to go. I just have to get around to it, and I'll get to it hopefully next week, because I shoot on Monday, I shoot on Tuesday morning, I shoot right angles. I shot 3 this morning, but Thursday and Friday is pretty much open for me. I've already done all the thumbnails for Bill Whittle Now and right angle and all that stuff. So I'll see if I can order that, and I'm going to change that logo. The logo that you see on the screen back there is not actually the one I wanted, although it's the one I wanted. There's a much cooler one. And we'll be getting to that. Sorry if anybody's getting seasick out there. Okay, so anyway, yeah, it's great. That content's not going anywhere, by the way. Those Bill Whittle Nows are never going to go away. I really think that this is, well, when I say never, I mean for the next 8, 10 years, something like that. It's the perfect solution. It gets me up, gets me going in the morning. Gets me in the chair early. I get a lot of work done, and then when I'm done with my political work, I can work on this Aurora work and not feel guilty about it, because I'm getting out 20 minutes a day on Bill Whittle Now plus the right angles. So, sweet. All right, let's stop gallivanting around here and lollygagging and all that stuff, and check out the fabulous Facebook page and see what's up. I know there's going to be some, I hope anyway, there's going to be some first man questions in there. I was giving that a lot of thought today. But you never know. You never know what you're going to get. Let's see. All right, so scrolling down, come on now. Bloody things. I've seen shows that are produced, and like over at Daily Wire, for example, they have switchers, editors, producers, sound guys, producers, camera guys, you know, support personnel and producers, and it's nice to not have to do all this stuff by yourself on the fly, I would imagine. All right, here we go. Let's see. Come on. Well done, Aloe. Yeah, we did a. I'll read the question. Aloe Constant. Got any comments on the new NPC memes that are causing great heartache among social justice warriors? They hate being called non-player characters. And he's put up a lovely, 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 lovely graphic of a sea of people all wearing the great exact same expression. And above that it says, diversity is our strength. They're the same color, the same shape, the same look, same expression. And diversity is our strength. Aloe, when I heard about this yesterday, I thought, I've never ever told Scott what I wanted to do, but I want to do this badly. I was going to say, hey, when we come back, can you do an NPC meme? And it was the second of the 3 shows we recorded today. I was just so happy. I just jumped over the moon and loved it. Let me tell you a little bit about what I talked about on the Bill Whittle Now. For those of you not familiar with the term or with gaming in general, the left, the social justice warriors, hate being called NPCs because, and I'm seeing more and more of this as more and more of the actual conservative content comes from the fringes of places like 4chan, which can be unsavory, but nevertheless, I just admire these guys, and what I admire about them is I admire their kind of commando attitude. I've talked before about how brilliant they are, and finding out where Shia LaBeouf is flying his "he will not divide his flag" and all the rest of it. But the reason I like this meme so much is because it's using gamer language, and the social justice warriors know what an NPC is, and calling them NPCs bugs them because it fits them so perfectly. That's why they're actually trying to get, I think Facebook is limiting it, and Twitter has taken away a bunch of accounts that say NPC. So here's the story behind NPC. NPC stands for non-player characters, and most people know them from computer games, but that's not where they started. Okay. So NPCs, as far as I know, started back with Gary Gygax and Dungeons and Dragons. That's the first time I ever encountered them. I probably played Dungeons and Dragons once or twice in my life, but I played the science fiction version of that game called Traveler. So let me explain to you what an NPC is, a non-player character, and how they work, and why it's such a perfect thing to hang on the neck of these social justice warriors. So, when you were playing a role-playing game like Dungeons and Dragons and Traveler, they didn't have computers to walk you through the story. They didn't have these characters and all the rest of the stuff. All we had was chips of wood and sharp stones, and we used to bang on these chips of wood in a certain way, and then we'd throw them up into the sky, and when they would come down, we'd look at which sides were up, and then we'd do a little dance with branches, and we'd go out and kill a mammoth, and we'd come back and play some more. But then along came Dungeons and Dragons, and so in Dungeons and Dragons, you've got 5 people at a table, and they're friends, and they're the players, and they are immersing themselves into the world of their imagination. Sometimes you have little figures to help you and maps and stuff, but essentially the whole thing takes place in your head, which is why it's so cool. I remember adventures that I've done in Traveler that are going to make it into these movies because they were just fantastic. So what is an adventure in Dungeons and Dragons, and how does Dungeons and Dragons work? Well, it's basic like this. You've got one person who becomes essentially the designated driver. And this is the person who's not going to be playing the game in the way that everybody else is playing the game. In D&D is called the Dungeon Master, sometimes it's called the Game Master, and Traveler is called the Referee, but he is essentially the storyteller. And his job is to take the players, let's just say 5 players, through the steps necessary to run this adventure. And as he walks these actual players through these series of events, the players will take actions that will determine how the story goes. Otherwise, they're just sitting there listening to a lunatic telling a tale. So the referee says, so you walk into a room and you see, and it's an old tavern, and standing behind the bar is a grizzled old man with an eye missing and a patch on his eye, and he's got a wooden leg, and he eyes you suspiciously as you come into the room. And then the 5 people have to decide what they're going to do. Well, old One-Eyed Pete behind the bar there is an NPC. He's a non-player character. He's not one of the 5 people that are on the adventure in this particular example. But the referee or the dungeon manager, the dungeon master cannot just come out and say, I want you to go to the fishing pier. So how do you get them to go to the fishing pier? Well, you have them walk into a tavern, and behind the bar is old One-Eyed Pete. And what do you want to do? I'd like to order a grog of mead, and this is where I depart company with Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, well, start up a conversation. And in the course of the conversation, the referee or the dungeon master is acting the role of this character, and he uses the character to get the players along the line that he wants them to go, so that he can tell this story that they can get to be in, immersive in, and make decisions in. So they make a decision, and the dungeon master, sometimes the decision's really cool, and you lead in a whole different direction. But more often, you have to kind of bring people slowly back. But they do get their chance to make their own decisions. And when you take a shot at somebody, or when you want to do something, you can't just say, "I shot at you, and I hit you," and the other gets, "No, you missed." So they have pretty extensive and pretty simple and pretty cool rules about, all right, I'm this good with a pistol, and he's this far away, and I shoot. I have a 2 in 10, I have a 3 in 12 chance of hitting the guy. So I roll a 12-sided dice, and if I roll a 1 or a 2 or 3, I hit him, and if I roll anything else, I miss him. And it's randomized, and it's what makes the game work. It's just random elements constantly coming into this. So here we go. And that's what an NPC is. Now, the reason that this is so appropriate for social justice warriors is that an NPC is the proverbial spear carrier. He's the Roman soldier in the far distance, while Rex Harrison is doing his soliloquy. Way down in the back are a bunch of actors who are just standing there, and they're in helmets, and they got their armor on and their shields, and they're spear carriers. And they stand there to give the impression of the Roman army, and that's their only job. So those are extras. And an NPC is a character who has no depth whatsoever, and his only purpose there is to parrot a number of lines that he is expected to say because he's typecast for that role. So, like in a movie, for example, a good example of an NPC might be the pizza boy. So you got your whole cast, and Brad Pitt and George Clooney and everybody else are ordering out for pizza, and knock, 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 and there's a pimply teenager there. Hey, your pizza's ready, and thank you, kid. So the pizza boy looks like a pizza boy. All he ever says is, "Your pizza's here," and that's it. It's a half-dimensional character. And this entire thing moved into computer games. So NPCs are people who are so limited in terms of their intelligence. And by intelligence, I mean simply their worldview is probably better. They're not there to talk about cetacean intelligence. They're not there to have a conversation about, Renaissance tapestries. They're there to get you to the fishing pier. That's all they do. And they're designed to look like a guy who comes from a fishing pier, and he's going to get you to the fishing pier. And that's the much depth that they have. So the reason that the social justice warriors hate this so much is because they understand the truth of it. Calling them NPCs clicked instantly with me in the same way that virtue signaling did, because the second they said NPCs, I got it. So in computer games, all the people we're actually calling NPCs now, they never played Dungeons and Dragons. They don't know a world before computers. Worthless young bastards. When I was a boy, we used to have to calculate things on sticks that we would put in special places out in the field, and we'd run around and we'd put marshmallows on the top if it meant a yes, and if there wasn't, then we'd leave it alone. And at the end of the day, we'd count the marshmallows and we'd figure out the answer was 16. Okay, so in the computer game, you get the exact same thing, except it's done by it was done previously with text, the kind of first computer games. Now you're playing a computer version of the game. So now it says you see a bar and it shows you a little picture of a bar and it shows you a little 8-bit image of old Pete behind the bar, and you walk up to him and you hit a key, and it'll give you like tab down choices. It'll be like say hello, order mead, ask for the latest advice, and so on. 4 things, bam. And you would pick, and then he'd spit back the program response, and you'd put back the response, and then off you'd go. Now, NPCs in Star Citizen, for example, you're supposed to deliver packages every now and then, and the guy is standing behind the counter, and he's always there. He's not doing anything. He's not thinking. He's not acting. Not talking. He's just standing there. He's just standing there like this, looking straight ahead. And you can walk up to one of these automatons, and if you get close enough to him, get an interaction screen, and your choices are say hello, drop off the package, pick up a package, say goodbye. I think that's pretty much it, verbatim. So now we get to the actual reason why these social justice warriors are NPCs and why this is such a great pejorative for them. The reason social justice warriors are NPCs is the following. Hey, how's it going? What can I do for you today? Socialism is the answer. Sorry? What? American soldiers are murderers and war criminals. Okay. How was your day? Capitalism is the most unfair and evil structure in the history of the world. I wasn't talking about capitalism. I was asking you how the day was. Do you like to fish? American soldiers are murderers and war criminals. What's your mom's name? Socialism is the answer. You're not really here, are you? Socialism is the answer. I mean, there's nothing really in there, right? I mean, it's not. You can't even call it artificial intelligence. It's a menu. It's a 4-item menu, right? Capitalism is the most evil and destructive thing on the face of the earth, and on and on and on it goes. As I pointed out on the Bill Whittle Now this morning, social justice warriors, this entire generation of millennials who are social justice warriors, and the many millennials who aren't, and bless them. But for all of these social justice warriors, they fail the artificial intelligence test. They fail the intelligence test. They fail the Turing test. And that's what I found so interesting about calling them NPCs. So, what is the Turing test? Well, Turing was a guy who was real influential in computer design. And this would be back in the 40s and 50s. And they said, well, how will we know? Somebody asked him, how will we know if we achieve artificial intelligence? And rather than saying, well, this many teraflops or this much memory or this ability to, he had the most brilliant answer. It really was just a brilliant answer, and Turing was a brilliant guy. So when he was asked what the definition of an intelligent machine would be, he said, well, I think that if you could sit down and have a conversation either through speech or through typing, just like chat, like a chat room, if you could have a conversation with one of these machines and in the space of half an hour not tell that it was a machine, then it's intelligent as far as I'm concerned. Which means that these social justice warriors do not pass the Turing test. They're not even close. They're like grasshopper intelligence. The Turing test basically says, when I say, hey, how's it going? You don't say socialism is the answer. You say, not bad, how are you? I say, fine. I said, how's your grandma doing? And you say, well, she's been a little tough, it's been tough for her. Her memories here and there and her hips bothering her, but otherwise not too bad. You don't say capitalism is the most evil system created in the history of the world. And so the definition of intelligence, according to Turing, and it's been taken as the holy grail of artificial intelligence, is, can you tell if you're talking to a person or not? And since the social justice warriors have such a limited number of canned responses to any question, they fail. And they're non-player characters, which means they're props in the world. They don't have a soul. They're not occupied by people. They're little automatons that are moved back and forth for a specific function, and they do one simple thing, and that's all they do. So do we need the Turing test for SJWs, asks AKA Woody Fool. We do, and they fail. They fail spectacularly, and they know they fail, and the reason they're reacting so strong, and this is why I love this NPC thing, is because it's true, and it hits them where they live. And I have some elaborate thoughts on that in tomorrow's Bill Whittle Now. Merlin Stark asks, so since they aren't real, can we kill them? Actually, no. I've looked it up, and it's against the law. Stupid country. Stupid regulations and rules. Vresic is saying it's dehumanizing and it's terrible. And it says, coming from that group that dismissed the right as Russian bots. Yeah, we're Nazis and we're fascists and we're racists and we're all the rest of it. But calling them a non-player character is dehumanizing and terrible, and it stresses them out good. Watch the Bill Whittle Now tomorrow to get the stick of it, because Scott says, well, don't you think that'll come off as cruel? And I'm rather proud of my answer there. Okay, so let's move on. Hey, there's our friend Merlin Wendibo, who I believe I've sat across Hammerhead deck from. Let's see what he has to say. As I recall, once upon a time, Spock explained why Vulcan abandoned emotion to become a logic-driven society, but I cannot remember the explanation. Did they find emotional liberalism was destroying their society, and is it possible for a Vulcan to be a today's liberal? Well, these are the kind of questions at which we excel here at the Stratosphere Lounge. Yes. First of all, it'd be nice to make sure I'm recording all of this in some way. How's everything looking? I'm sorry, I just want to double check. Yeah, rolling? Hey, sweet. Okay. As I recall, Merlin, the Vulcans embraced logic and stoicism after suffering a terrible war, being as smart as they are and as tough as they are, and as emotional as they were. They nearly exterminated themselves and basically scared themselves so badly that as an entire race, they essentially decided we've got to abandon these emotions. We got to just not so much breed it out of us as just maintain and increase a mental discipline and just constantly get away from emotion and live in a world of pure logic. And Simon Says is absolutely right. Fellow Aurora and Simon Says liberals and Vulcans are polar opposites. It's exactly right. They are polar opposites. They abandoned emotion because it was so dangerous, and they went to a world of pure intellect and logic. And at this point, I would like to repeat something that I've said probably twice before, something like that, but it's a very interesting point, and it's worth going over every year or two. So the Vulcans are superior to humans in essentially in every way. They're stronger. They're much smarter. They're more disciplined. They're more under control. They're more everything. And there are analogies for Vulcans. The Vulcans in science fiction are exactly the same as the elves in fantasy. The elves are exactly the same. They're a race of people that live. Well, the elves live forever. The Vulcans live for hundreds of years. Their health is much better than humans. They're, by every measure, smarter, more educated, more elegant, more alert, more physically dangerous, more everything. They are superior to humans in every single way. And there's a third, even older analog to this, and that is angels. Angels are celestial beings. They commune with God. They fly through the universe at the speed of thought. They're immortal. They can't be killed. They have the ability to perform miracles. They never have to eat. They never grow old. They never get sick. They never die. They're superior to humans in every single way, like the elves and like the Vulcans. So the interesting part of this equation is, why is it then that the Federation is human? Why aren't humans just an outpost in a Vulcan Federation? The Vulcans are that far advanced over us in terms of, there goes a hardworking minion. We'll see you later there. Thanks, pal. We have a little coal pit in the back. We try to keep running just to make a few extra bucks. So the question is, if Vulcans are that superior, why ain't they running everything? And if elves are so superior, why is it that the world has become the province of man, of humans? And why is it that God loves people more than angels? Isn't that interesting? Why does God love humans more than angels? Humans are filthy, evil, occasionally good, but selfish, greedy. They get sick, die, children die. They're got all kinds of diseases, mental and physical. And yet God loves people, and he merely utilizes angels. What is that? What's that all about? I find that so interesting. In the Lord of the Rings, when you get into things like the Silmarillion, you learn things like that the Creator had given humans the gift of being able to leave the world. And nobody knew where they went when they died. The elves didn't know, and most of the other people didn't know. They didn't know, Iluvatar. Eru, a.k.a. Iluvatar. I love the Silmarillion. It's a fantastic story. But basically what the elves realized was that their creator made them, the elves, made them perfect. And first, the word elves is from Eldar, and Eldar means the firstborn. People of the stars. They were the first, and humans came much later. They're like a sick little brother that tags along in the world. So why all of the love for people? You think, oh, everybody. See, this is the thing that's so interesting to me. Everybody wants to be a Vulcan or an elf or an angel because of the tremendous power that they have and the unbelievable benefits that are so obvious. They never get sick, never get old, never die. Perfect knowledge and incredible discipline and all the rest of it. Why is it time and time again that humanity is the one that's favored? Well, needless to say, it's humans telling the story. So a better question is, what is it about us psychologically that automatically understands that perfection is not only not something that we can achieve, but it's not something we want? That's really, really interesting. The elves, who live forever unless they were slain in battle, and a few of them were, the elves had to live forever. They couldn't leave. And this is a staple of a lot of science fiction and some fantasy and so on, but it's a really interesting point. Could you get to the place where you're just tired of living? And I think the answer is absolutely. For me, probably 5 or 6 years old when I reached that point, pretty much learned everything I need to know. But what is it about that? Because if you read the Silmarillion, you realize that Tolkien has made it kind of a curse to be an elf, to have to stay here, until the sun goes out. It's actually a curse, and the reason that men take over from the elves and that humans, it's a human federation, not a Vulcan one, is because of the imperfections. It's because of death. When you have 1,000-year or a 10,000-year or an unlimited lifespan, you can kind of get to it tomorrow. And you can not only get to it tomorrow, you can wait until things are perfect to get to it. But if you've got, 70, you got to get moving. So that's why all these things are in place. I find that entire dynamic absolutely fascinating, and really, really do. Yeah. And so the second part of the question is, did they find that emotional liberalism was destroying their society? No, they found that just savage warfare was destroying their society. Is it possible for a Vulcan to be today's liberal? A modern liberal is the cartoon image of everything that the Vulcans despise about humans. None of the courage, none of the guts, none of the craftiness, none of the compassion that people like Kirk have. They're just a bunch of emotional crying children, and they'd put them in they'd put them in the fire crater until they grew up, something like that. Anyway, how are we doing? Yeah, we'll go a little while. Moving on. Top fan Dave Olson says, so Elon Musk and Yasaku Maezawa are going to send a spaceship around the moon in 5 years or so. I thought it was less, actually. And instead of hard-headed, taciturn engineers and fighter jocks, they want to fill the ship with artistic types like filmmakers and philosophers. They'd probably like to have a married couple as well. Hint, hint. Let me see if there is yeah, I want to tie these together. I'm trying to see if there's any First Man related questions. So let me take that that Elon Musk thing and let me tie it into Martin Archer's question here, which is, instead of Gosling, who would you have cast as Armstrong? Anyone in movie or TV history? As Buzz, I'd have a 40-year-old John Voight as Buzz and a dialed-back Steve McQueen as Buzz. So I'm assuming John Voight as Neil. That's a fun question. I kind of think if you're going to cast Neil Armstrong, you probably want to go with Jimmy Stewart. Jimmy Stewart was in The Spirit of St. Louis and played Charles Lindbergh. I forget how old Lindbergh was when he flew the Atlantic, but I don't think he was over 27 or something like that. And Stewart was mid-40s when he played the role, but he wanted to play it really badly. And he didn't. He played it very well. And Jimmy Stewart carries that essential sort of innocence about him. I want to talk about First Man in some detail here. And try to get Dave Wilson's question in there too. Because First Man, and if you haven't seen my right angle on it, I did see it. I saw it over the weekend, but I paid for Venom, and then I just went into First Man. Eric Blake says Ryan Gosling is perfectly cast. He is perfectly cast. Ryan Gosling could have been a tremendous Neil Armstrong. He just wasn't. He wasn't a tremendous Neil Armstrong, and the reasons he wasn't, I'll get to in a minute. So the way I can stitch these two questions together is I can talk about First Man, but I can also talk about artists and filmmakers in space and so on. The most important thing I can say about First Man is, needless to say, everybody who knows anything about the show knows that Neil Armstrong's my lifelong idol and worship him as the pinnacle of everything I wanted to be ever since I watched him get off the limb when I was 10 years old. So I thought, okay, I'll go watch First Man because I have to see the story. There's no way I couldn't go to First Man and see the story. And I thought, oh, it's going to be filled with all of this anti-American stuff, but at least I get a chance to get to know Neil. As it turns out, it was the exact opposite. There was not any anti-American stuff in the movie. The flag raising was not there, but as I realized after seeing the movie, it didn't really belong there, because I had thought, like everybody else, that in the movie he's going to land on the moon and Neil and Buzz are going to walk around and they cut the flag raising out because of just plain sheer nastiness, and I suspect there's a lot of that in there. I'm sure the idea of showing them raising the American flag was galling to them, but when they get to the moon, the experience is so sparse. It's so emotionally sterile, and it's so internal. It's so internal in Neil's head that I think if you'd put it in there, it wouldn't have made any sense or worked, because you don't see them do anything on the moon. They don't do anything. Buzz and Neil don't do anything on the moon. Neil stands at the edge of a crater and cries, which I don't believe actually happened. Yes, I understand, Dave, about me being on the flight. I'm not sure I want to go on a flight with 12 other artists. If I'm going to go to the moon, the last thing I want to do is bring Los Angeles with me. So let's talk about this whole artistic thing and so on. When I came out of the movie, first thing I said to Natasha was, I just didn't like Neil Armstrong at all. I didn't like him. And yes, you have permission to go see First Man, Merlin. You just can't pay for it. You have to go pay for something else. Pay for something and then go in and watch First Man. Then everybody's happy. Or unhappy, as the case may be. I didn't like him. And I didn't like him because the way he's portrayed in the movie and the way he's written is not that he had the courage and the willpower to control his emotions so much as he seemed to be just stuffing things, like he was on the edge of snapping and stuffing things, and that instead of mastery and stoicism, what we saw was just kind of a repressive kind of a faint kind of cowardice, really. And I didn't like him, and there's not much in the movie for you to like about him. And this is the thing that is so illuminating about this movie. A lot of people on the left are saying it's Oscar gold, and it's like, I mean, Ryan Gosling is a fantastically good actor, and he gives a great performance in this movie. He really does. It's just not Neil Armstrong. And the reason it's not Neil Armstrong is particularly interesting to me. So I talk about this in the Right Angle show, so I don't want to keep repeating myself. So I'll just let me get that read and say I've said some of this before. But here's the stuff for me. When the movie opened, I'm not going to give you spoiler alerts. Okay, spoiler alert. Ready? They actually make it to the moon and come back safely. Now, giving it away, it's like Luke's father. But it starts with him on the X-15 flight, goes right into action, which is smart. And I know all of this stuff like the back of my hand. But there was something immediately that I was not expecting, and that is that, you see the X-15, and the X-15 looks like a missile, and the B-52s looks like it's made out of granite, rock solid, and off they go into the stratosphere and stuff. But you're in the X-15, and you're still on the wing, and everything is just shaking, and they overshook the movie by 2 orders of magnitude. But you can see the fairing, that's holding the thing on. You can see it kind of flexing, and it's not a smooth ride, and it's not fun. And you can hear the metal creaking, and throughout the entire film, everywhere, in Gemini mission, in the command module, on the LEM, you constantly get the sense that this machine is about to break. And that was not anything I'd ever considered before, but I loved it. I started in gliders, and I flew mostly carbon fiber gliders, and I liked them very much. And once or twice I flew in metal gliders, Schweitzers. And when you'd pull a more than a G on those things, you could hear the wings just oil can. It's unsettling. And this whole thing was doing that. They just looked like they were just about to fall apart, and they were. So the Gemini launch again is overdone. The whole thing's overdone. Overdone dark, overdone shaky, overdone stylistically, way overdone. But there are moments there where it was actually pretty cool, and gave me some insight into the experience, but nothing into Neil. So here's the problem that I noticed right away. Starts out with Neil flying the X-15, and he gets her up to 200,000 feet, comes back into re-enter, and he bounces off the atmosphere. And now he's got to get this thing back down and under control, and so on. And it's the first of many times where they put the camera into a paint shaker, turn on the paint shaker, and then go for a big close-up of Neil's eyes and big close-up of the instruments, which are unreadable blurs, and then the paint shaker is showing all of these things, and here's the problem. You never see Neil Armstrong master of the situation. You see that maybe he's the only guy who hasn't passed out, or maybe he's the only guy that hasn't gone screaming off into the night like the rest of the Hollywood crowd. But you never get the sense that he is willing himself to be in control over this. You never get the sense that he's just better than the emergencies that he encountered. All you get is a sense that he's terrified, but he keeps his terror under control. Stuffs it the same way he stuffs his relationship with his wife. The whole movie is predicated around the loss of his daughter. I saw an interview with Neil on 60 Minutes, and they asked him about his daughter, and he's 85 or something when they shot that thing, or 80, late 70s, something like that. And he talks about his daughter who died at 2 years old back in 61, something like that. And 80-year-old Neil's practically crying on 60 Minutes. But he's not talking about, he's talking about, I think it affected my work, and he's about to break down and cry. The problem is that they make that entire thing the subject of it's the spine of the story. Neil's entire career as an astronaut orbits around, see what I did there? Orbits around the death of this little girl and constantly having flashbacks to her and seeing her and stuff. And this is why the movie's an utter failure artistically. Because I have no doubt, none, that losing his daughter at age 2 to brain cancer just put a wound on him that he never got over. But that's not what Neil Armstrong's life was about. Neil Armstrong didn't live his life thinking about his daughter. And they made it this way in the movie. And the reason they made it this way in the movie is because they had to bring so much family stuff into this movie. And now we start to get into the politically correct stuff that you can actually start to deconstruct. So really, while the film has got some interesting action sequences and a great deal of shaking, the movie is about his relationship with his family and his wife. And in that particular role, Neil Armstrong is maybe not the first man in the world. He's maybe not the best guy in the world in terms of being a father or a husband. And that's a gigantic artistic error, and it's a historical slander. And Neil Armstrong wasn't selected to go to... Neil Armstrong wasn't the first man because he was best at stuffing emotions away. Neil Armstrong was the first man because he had the ability to outthink life-threatening situations in real time. He simply kept his head. He kept his head in the most, and again, some of the movies are very good. When you see Gemini 8 spinning as fast as it does, it's just terrifying. So so you get a movie about a guy who's repressed and can't communicate with his wife and won't talk to his kids and broods about his dead daughter, which is exactly what you would get if you made a movie about a film director. That's pretty much it. If you made a movie about a film director or a writer or an actor, like Birdman or something like this, is exactly what you get. You get this emotional kind of inner conflict, and I'm going to put on this tough exterior, but deep inside I'm bleeding and wounded and blah 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 blah. And it's just a lie. And it's a lie, I suppose, on some part for the box office, I suppose on some part to make it tolerable as a date movie, but the it's there are a lot of people you can tell stories about dysfunctional marriage about, but if you tell the Neil Armstrong story as a story of a dysfunctional marriage and a man who can't communicate because he's emotionally unavailable, then you no longer have any reason whatsoever to tell the story of Neil Armstrong, because it's not Neil Armstrong's story. Neil Armstrong's story is much bigger than that. Gosling, it's not Gosling's fault. He's a good actor. He got it. He got it from the direction and the script. But he's a robot, and and you just don't like him. He's not a happy guy. He's not a fun guy. He doesn't smile. He's so standoffish that you just really don't like him. And this is the antithesis of Neil Armstrong by every account. Everybody who ever talked to him, everybody who ever worked with him, said he was so friendly, so open, and again and again and again and again and again, the thing he was vocal about, loquacious about, was that he had very little to do with any of this stuff. That Neil Armstrong would go everywhere all the time and say to people, there were 400,000 people that put a man on the moon, put an American on the moon, and I'm one of them. I'm one of the 400,000. I'm not any more important than the rest of them, and I couldn't have gotten there without any of the rest of them. And I had mentioned before, when I was all lit up about the flag waving thing a couple weeks ago on Stratosphere Lounge, I'd mentioned before the uniqueness of the Apollo 11 patch in that it's the only mission patch, I think, that doesn't have the crew members' names on it. But what I didn't know until earlier today, doing some follow-up, I wouldn't even call it research, just, grazing. What I didn't know was that the mission commander has 51% of the vote on the particular mission patch, and it was Armstrong who absolutely insisted that we would not put the names of the astronauts on that patch, which is why the Apollo 11 patch is unlike any other mission patch. It's just magnificent, and I didn't know that Neil Armstrong was in the loop on that decision, but basically what I'm hearing now is that not only was in the loop, he insisted on it. He insisted on their names not being on that patch because it was about a bunch of people. And Eric Blake is got some interesting points to make. So you just don't like Neil Armstrong at all. I didn't like him. And that was hard for me, because I want to like him a lot, because I do. I love him. I think he's the greatest man who ever lived. So they didn't capture any of Neil. They didn't capture any of his. He was always scared. He just was scared under control, and he was never. I never saw a moment ever. And I'm willing to make compromises as a storyteller, needless to say, but I never saw a moment where he went from being scared to being Neil Armstrong, because everybody's scared. But I never saw the moment in Ryan Gosling's expression or in his eyes where he goes from being terrified to being Neil frickin' Armstrong. And since I never saw that, then the movie's not about him. The movie's about Hollywood. It's not even liberals. It's not like there's a left-wing message in here. It's at least not about left-wing politics. the movie becomes a story of a man and his wife and their relationship and their troubled relationship with the children, and I just don't care. And part of this is a male-female thing. Not that there's anything wrong with that. So to give you an idea, there's a scene where he's about ready to go to the. I mean, he's packing to go, and he doesn't want to go in and talk to his kids. And his wife gets hysterical and starts screaming and yelling at him and says, "You've got to go in there and talk to your boys." And you realize, oh my God, this man with iron nerves is afraid of emotional commitment. He's afraid to go and talk to his boys. Now, this may have happened. I have no doubt it did happen this way because it was based on First Man, James Lifton, I think, and Neil had a lot to do with that book. So I'm not trying to say that didn't happen, but what I'm trying to say is that they made the movie about a guy who was too emotionally uptight to talk to his kids because he was about to go and fly on the moon. He was packing his stuff and wanted to get out of there because if the story tells anything about the truth, then I would want to get the hell out of this place too. Not only did he not get emotional support, I thought, from his wife. Certainly in the movie, when he's getting ready to go, he's packing to go down there for Apollo freaking 11. Instead of his wife supporting him, she's just plain bitching at him, just bitching and yelling at him and giving him grief and yelling and screaming at him and, making him feel bad. The guy's about to go to the moon, lady. Leave him alone. If you're not going to give him some support, then shut up. He's about to fly to the frickin' moon. And this is the part of the thing that I think mentioned a second ago about breaks down into male and female, because they've got this incredible speech, where the wife says, there are two boys in there. And they may be about to lose their father. And I instantly, I thought, well, boys lose their fathers every single day. And it's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing. But boys lose their fathers every single day. But they don't lose their fathers flying to the frickin' moon every single day. And that never entered the movie. It never entered the movie. He's just a guy who's afraid to talk to his kids. He's too repressed. He's going to the moon, lady. If you're not going to give the guy a sandwich and a kiss, then just get out of his way and stop making him miserable. He's got some things on his mind, And this is the big divide between the Pink tribe and the Gray tribe. The Pink tribe made this movie, and they can't understand the Gray tribe's. They can't understand the Gray tribe's value set. All they see is a guy who's emotionally unavailable. Dave Big Booty said, "What did Natasha think of the movie?" Well, as it turns out, Natasha had the most profound thing to say about that, as usual, and I'm still thinking about it. We're coming out of the theater, and I said, I don't know, honey. I just didn't like him. I thought he was a robot. I thought he came off just kind of dead. And Natasha said, well, Billy, he has to be mostly dead. He's constantly going straight into the world of the dead. And you can't go in and out of the world of death that frequently if you have any kind of a nervous system. I thought, wow. Yeah, that's right. You can't be Neil Armstrong and be Ryan Gosling or Bill Whittle for that matter. You can't. You cannot do the job with the emotional level of most people. You have to be able to have that sense of discipline. And that's why I love Neil Armstrong. I love him because he's all the things I'm not. Although, I have to say, reflexively, having had 3 engine failures in a single-engine airplane, all 3 of them exact same thing. Oh, God. All right. Let's get this thing on the ground. You're a glider pilot. Glide. Done this before. You put the plane down anywhere. You know what you're doing. And that was very Armstrongian of me, and that's why I don't want to give myself too short a shift here, because because there are elements about him that I modeled myself on and that I've actually felt like I've managed to live up to. So we never saw any of that. Some people had pointed out that they made Buzz into a jerk. Well, Buzz is a jerk. He is a jerk. He was and is a terrible person, like Bill Shatner. I've heard stories of people who asked Buzz. These are not fans. These are not people at an air show. Buzz was doing a tour of, like, it was Johnson Space Flight Center, or it was Huntsville or something. He was going to a NASA facility, and they had gotten a picture that they wanted Buzz to sign for a charity for sick children or something. Really, NASA engineers are asking Buzz Aldrin to sign his name to something so that we can give it to this charity, and Buzz wouldn't do it unless he got paid. And everybody there is like, they go from, you couldn't, Neil Armstrong was worshipped because Neil Armstrong would not take credit for anything. And Buzz, on the other hand, had the 400,000 people who put those two guys on the moon. Neil's giving them all the credit. What Buzz is basically doing is saying, they don't mean anything. I'm the guy who landed on the moon. I'm the star. And when you hear stories like this, you think, Buzz, God damn it, you were selected by the country. It's a privilege and an honor. You owe this country. We owe you, yes, but you owe this country back. This is not something that you built by yourself. When you hear stories like that, it's just like, God damn it, Buzz. Really? But that's Buzz. And they picked Neil because Neil had not only nerves of steel, Neil was such a great engineer that he knew the nuts and bolts of that ship better than the people that built it. He just obsessively learned everything about that vehicle. And he designed the lunar landing simulator, which was a flying simulator, not a computer simulator, which nearly killed him. But didn't. And in fact, he goes up in this thing, the flying bedstead, and gets out of control. He punches out, ejects 100 feet above the ground, probably a fifth of a second before he's dead. And then Neil parachutes down through this fireball of his wreckage of this thing, and they pick him up and he goes to work. And they come in the morning and there's Neil doing the paperwork at his desk with his little clip-on tie and his short sleeve shirt with the pocket protector. That's astonishing. So Buzz is a jerk, and Bill Shatner's a jerk, and a lot of people are jerks. Patton was a jerk. And I want to get to that last thing in a minute, so please remind me about Patton and the right stuff in Apollo 13, because I'll wrap on this, I think, for the night. But it's okay. You can be a jerk if you deliver. And that's why when you have diva behavior from brilliant artists, well, diva comes from the opera, right? And you got one person in the world who can sing this way, and she acts like she's the only person who can sing this way. And it's horrible and annoying, but nevertheless, she delivers on the goods. She's got the goods, and she delivers. So diva behavior in people that don't have any talent is the only thing that's absolutely intolerable to me. So Buzz is a jerk. But they didn't put him on the mission because they wanted a guy who's fun to talk to. There is one moment in the movie, this is a small spoiler alert if you've gotten it already, but Neil's friend Elliot C. is killed in a crash. He's an astronaut who never got into space. He died in training. He's usually listed as one of the astronauts that died as an astronaut. Elliot C. and another guy were killed on a routine flight, and they just went into a mountain. And Neil is outside at this funeral, and Ed White comes out, and Ed White's not going to have a good end either. And Neil's out there looking like he's got like a camera, and he's trying to, like, he's filming the moon or something. He's looking at the moon. And Ed White comes out and starts, chatting him up, because Neil and Elliot C. were great friends. And in the movie, and I'm sure this happened in real life, Neil Armstrong turns to Ed White and he says, "Do you think that I came out here so that I could talk to somebody? Is that what you think? Do you think I left the party and came out here so I could talk about things?" And I didn't laugh. I just went, "Yep, got it. Got it." So No, he didn't. He didn't go. He didn't want to talk about these things. He's processing it. That's what men do. They go off and they process things, and they do what they have to do, and then they go back and go to work. And so there was that. So let me just compare this movie to two other movies. Excuse me. In First Man, I'm sorry, I didn't wrap up on Buzz. You don't have to like Buzz. Buzz was on the mission because Buzz was Dr. Rendezvous. Buzz Aldrin essentially worked out orbital mechanics in his head and understood on a visceral level what other people, including Neil, had to do intellectually. Buzz, by all accounts, Buzz understood orbital dynamics, understood the strange idea that if you've got something in front of you and you want to catch it, you have to slow down. And that's very hard to process. But if you've got something ahead of you and you shoot towards it, you're just going to get in a higher orbit, and the higher orbit's going to slow you down. If you want to catch something that's ahead of you, you have to slow down, move to an inner orbit, pass it, and then slowly accelerate again and match him. And Buzz did this in his head. It was Dr. Rendezvous. He's simply brilliant at it. And he's exactly the guy you want. You want a guy who's got the ability to visualize mathematics the way that Buzz Aldrin could. I think Buzz Aldrin could see math in a way that only real geniuses could have. Yes, and Eric's right again. You don't get that. You never get. He's just a jerk in the movie, and it's like, oh, poor Neil. Well, not so much poor Neil, because I don't give a damn about poor Neil. Poor Michael Collins. He's got to fly in this mission with this absolute loudmouth jerk Buzz Aldrin and this metallic robot Neil Armstrong, and it wasn't that way. You're right, Eric. You never get a chance to see what Buzz brought to the mission, and what Buzz brought to the mission was Neil had a visceral understanding of the hardware, and he's a good stick. He had tremendous flying skill and nerves of steel. But Buzz had the math and had the ability to visualize not only the orbital paths, but the flight paths. And Buzz was the ship's computer on the way down. They're just constantly, radar's failing. He had a 1202 alert. The only time you ever hear Neil Armstrong in real life sound annoyed, the only time I've ever heard him sound annoyed, is he's 55 seconds away from landing in this crater, and they've got their radar altimeter, which is telling them how high they are above the moon, and suddenly the thing just goes out. This is the first landing attempt, boop, gone. 1202, no radar data. What's a 1202? NASA's working on it. They've never seen a 1202. They're trying to figure out what a 1202 is. And meanwhile, the Eagle is descending to the lunar surface, and these guys are getting closer, and they're down to 5, 6, 7% fuel, something like that. And Neil says, can we get an answer on this 1202, please? Something like that. And so they didn't have their radar. And the radar altimeter is a handy thing to have if you're going to land on an object that you've never landed on. It's useful, especially since you've got 10, 20 seconds of fuel, to know how high you are above the surface. Because there are no visual cues. You're not down there looking at cars. There's no shopping centers down there to tell you how high you are. You can just fly it in on eyeballs. You have nothing to judge the scale by. It's like landing on they say that when guys are landing seaplanes on a perfectly smooth glass lake, it's actually much more dangerous because they can't tell where the surface of the water is. They can't really, they'll fly right into it because they can't really tell where it is. So Buzz had to be on that mission. I don't know what Michael Collins' particular contribution was. To be perfectly honest with you, I know Neil and Buzz a lot better than I know about Mike Collins. But these two guys were the best two guys we had. The Apollo 11 crew was the most qualified crew we had, and I think by a wide margin. So there's that. So anyway, enough of Buzz. Back to these two other movies. I want to compare First Man to Apollo 13 and to The Right Stuff. And I mentioned this real early. It's like, you're in The Right Stuff, and you've got these 7 guys who are arrogant, swaggering jerks by many people's accounts. And so how are you going to make a movie about guys like this? My favorite joke, which I try to tell every week if I can, what do pilots use for birth control? Their personalities. it's true. So when you see The Right Stuff, the two things that made a big impression on me, and I remember it very clear, it was 1984, was it? 83, something like that. And the first time you meet Alan Shepard, he's out at sea on a carrier. I guess it's Vietnam. Yeah. And they've gone to look for pilots, and that's Jeff Goldblum, wasn't it? I think. So you see these guys landing on the carrier, and then they got Shepard, and they're interviewing Shepard on the deck, and the two NASA guys are seasick and they're throwing up over the rails. And Shepard says something to the effect of, "I hear you guys have got something really dangerous." He said, "Yes, it's exceedingly dangerous." And he says, "Count me in instantly. It's going to be dangerous." Yes, he was landing a scooter. He was flying an A4 Skyhawk onto the deck. What do you know about this guy? Nothing, except for the fact he's got this big grin on his face. Is this going to be life-threatening, really, really dangerous? Yes. I'm in. Don't need to know anything else. If it's going to be dangerous and exciting, I'm in. Now you got the basics of Shepard. And then, of course, the classic is you got Gordon Cooper driving through the Mojave Desert in a red convertible. And you got that Dennis Quaid grin. And he's just driving along, and he's not a particularly good husband either. He's driving along, and he just turns to his wife and says, "Who's the best pilot you ever saw?" And she just smiles. And you love the guy. You just love him. He's all throughout the movie, "Who's the best pilot you ever saw?" And they make a joke of it, and they kind of close that joke out at the very end of the movie. It's delightful. It's delightful. So now you've met Gordon Cooper, and you like him. And there are little things to like about all of these guys. And you see John Glenn getting into an argument about, one of the mission things, a personal item. I think it was with Shepard or with Grissom or something. You see Grissom and what he went through, the tortures he went through, and so on and so on and so on. And they're real people, and you care about them. And my favorite Glenn moment is when they're saying, well, I'm not going to do this. And he says, well, then I'm going to take you off a mission. I'm going to replace you with somebody else. And one of the guys says, well, who's going to fly it? Meaning all of them are backing up Glenn, and they're 7 brothers, and they're a unit, and they stick together. One of my favorite movie moments of all time, I mean this is probably one of my top 3 or 4 favorite movie moments ever, is in The Right Stuff, where we've basically seen most of the action already and seen what they've been through. And they have this giant barbecue in an indoor arena in Texas that Johnson is throwing. And you see all the uncouth people and the photographers, and all the astronauts are all straight-laced, and they're trying to be, good PR guys and stuff. And it's kind of a drag. And then they have the room kind of go to dark, and there's a couple of white-hot spotlights on stage, and this dancer named Sally Rand comes out and does this fan dance. And I think they're playing Claire de Lune. And the room becomes absolutely silent because she's doing this incredibly elegant dance, and of course it's all feathers, so it represents wings and flight and so on. They're intercutting this with, of course, didn't happen in real life, but artistically it's a very good thing. They're intercutting this big party for these successful astronauts with Chuck Yeager trying to make an altitude record in an F-104 and having to, crater the plane and bail out and barely survive. But that's not what's so great. So now all of a sudden you've got this room full of all these people, all these loud, boisterous people, and it's utterly silent. And you're watching this dancer. You can't even see her face really. And they're playing Claire de Lune, and it's just this very peaceful moment. And you see one of these guys, one of the 7, looks over at another one, catches his eye, and the other guy looks back at him. He catches his eye. And they're not making faces. They're just looking at each other. And then they look out at another guy, and he turns and looks at them. And the 7 of them form like these, it's like a spider web of like these silver threads that come out of them and connect them to each other, but to no one else. And in that moment, in that 30 seconds, you get the sense of how different these guys are from everybody else. They have the right stuff, but it's not a boasting kind of a thing. It's just beautiful. It's beautiful. I was telling Scott about this. I think it was Scott on the right angle, or Steve, and they nailed it. I never thought about it this way. I said these 7 guys they have something that nobody else has. And they said, yeah, and the filmmaker is so good that they make you feel like you've got it too. I thought, yeah, that's absolutely great. Yes. In that moment, you are the eighth astronaut. You're the eighth Mercury astronaut. There's 7 Mercury astronauts, but at that moment in that barbecue, you're the eighth one. And you're sharing this with them. And it just makes me cry. It's just so beautiful. It's such a beautiful moment. And it's so underplayed, and it's not about anything other than just this love that these guys have for each other. You know, this mutual admiration, respect, and love that they have for each other after what they've been through and going to continue to go through. So beautiful. So that's The Right Stuff. And The Right Stuff is essentially about 4 of the 7. You know, you got Grissom, you got Glenn, you got Cooper, and you've got Shepard. And a little less on Carpenter and Schirra and Cunningham. I think I got that right. Slayton, one of those. It doesn't belong there. And Deke Slayton does. But anyway, and then there's Apollo 13. So you've got Tom Hanks, who's just instantly lovable character, who's also playing Jim Lovell, who's, Lovell's a steely-eyed missile man. But Hanks isn't playing him like a robot. Hanks is playing him like a guy who's good at his job. And you can tell he's afraid, but he's too busy to be afraid. He's too busy to be afraid now. And you just love him. And it's my high privilege to have gotten to know Gary Sinise pretty well. And he's my favorite character in that movie. I was going to say by far, but Ed Harris is awful good, and the guys working on the electronics are good. But Sinise plays, what's his name? Is it Schweikert? Apollo 13 was Lovell, Fred Hayes, and Schweikert, I think. Rusty Schweikert, I think, is a rookie. And it was supposed to have been Ken Mattingly. And he was supposed to be on the mission. It was supposed to be Mattingly, Lovell, and Hayes. And at the last minute, they say Mattingly has, we think he's got measles, so he's washed out of the flight at the last minute. I mean, the last minute. And he's just drunk and just depressed and all the rest of it. But then when there's an accident, Mattingly's the command module pilot, and, well, I think he's the command module pilot. In any event, Mattingly knows the systems, and Gary Sinise just knocks it out of the park. He just locks himself in the simulator. He says, I don't want anything in here that's not up there. I don't want any flashlights, don't want any food, don't want any water. I want the temperature in here to be the temperature that they got in the thing. And you just care about these people, and you like them. And I was mentioning, you see Patton, and Patton is a unpleasant guy. In real life, an unpleasant guy, and George C. Scott plays up the unpleasantness, and they're not running away from it, and they're not sugarcoating it. He's not a nice guy. But you watch Patton, and you come away loving him because they put the essence of what Patton was into that story, which was written by Francis Ford Coppola, if I remember correctly. Command module pilot on Apollo 18. Yeah. So he never got it was 18 or 16. He never got to fly, I don't think. No, he flew 16, right? Yeah, young Mattingly and Duke on Apollo 16. So you've got people that you care about, and Patton, back to Patton. You got George C. Scott gave you the essence of what this guy was, but you got the sense that this guy he's a man above history. He's Winston Churchill, and he's Neil Armstrong, and he's a person worthy of a biography film. Because while there's plenty not to like about Patton, there's plenty to love about Patton. And Dave Big Booty says I'd follow Patton into hell because he'd get me home. Yes, absolutely. And that speech at the beginning is based on a speech that Patton gave. Coppola punched it up quite a quite a good deal. He cleaned it up and sharpened it up. But essentially, it's what Patton said. And that whole first 5 minutes of Patton is it's just magnificent. I'll never forget it, ever, ever. I was young when I saw it. I was actually so young that I was actually giggling a little bit at some of the, the bad words, but it was like, I mean, it's just, we're going to, we're going to grab them by the nose and we're going to kick them in the ass. We're going to beat the living hell out of them all the time. We are going to go through them like crap through a goose. And, and other classics, the classic being, I'd be proud to lead you fine men into battle any place and any time. And something to the effect of, when this is over, and you've got your grandson sitting on your knee and asking you what you did in the Great World War II, you won't have to tell him, well, son, I shoveled shit in Louisiana. How do you not like that guy? How do you not love that guy? He's ruthless, but he's a winner. And if you're going to risk your life and go to war, ultimately, I suspect this is certainly what I read and feel to be true, that soldiers obviously want to come home. They're not in any hurry to not come home. But they'd rather have a general that won rather than one that was overly solicitous about their welfare, like McClellan and so on. If we're going to fight, then let's fight and get it over with and go home. So let's just get this thing won. Yeah, that's Eric is that's the best line actually. No, I think it's like, no poor bastard ever won a war by dying for his country. You win a war by making the other poor bastard die for his country. And I thought, man, that's just fantastic. So anyway. Yeah, it's great. And the supernatural quality they put in Patton too, that sense that, they're driving him out to, they're in Tunisia, I guess, and Battle of Kasserine Pass. They're driving out to the battlefield to see all the wreckage, and it's a catastrophe. And on the way out, he says, "Turn left here," and he says, "No, General, it's up to the right." He says, "Don't, I know where the battlefield is." And he goes to this empty field, and he stands there on the site of Carthage, and he looks at this open field, and you can tell he can see Carthage. He can see the city. And he talks about the battle for Carthage in the Second Punic War, Third Punic War. And he closes by saying, "I was here." You believe him. I believe him. And that gives Patton grandeur. And Neil Armstrong deserved better than what he got. Yeah, that'll do it, I think, 7:45. And I was going to see if I might take a quick look and see if I can get this thing finished. But in any event, I'll try and upload this now, and I will try to get the missing episode, which has been missing for 2 weeks, up tomorrow. Okay, that'll do it. Thanks very much for joining us, as always, and for the continuing support. And it's great to be here. And I don't see any reason why I won't be here next Wednesday, but you never really know. But I expect to be here, so hopefully we'll see you then. And again, thanks to all of the guys in the Star Citizen thing, and it's great to meet all of you. And I was very, very proud of the way we looked and of the work that you all did, because I was way off the radar for quite a while. Okay, that'll do it. Thanks. Now we begin our shutdown procedures as dictated by law and checklists. So we'll say goodbye to our YouTube friends. And if you're watching this on YouTube, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next